What up, y'all? So Iuno's been out for a while now, and aside from her extremely potent damage, what really is surprising to me the most is just how flexible this character can be when it comes to team building. So for this video, I decided to go through every single Iuno team I could think of and see how they really perform compared to each other. We will be going through both main DPS teams and sub DPS teams, and we will also touch on which first slot sustained characters are the best. While yapping, I'll also try my best to explain how I play these team comps and what are their strengths and weaknesses. So if you pulled Iuno just because she's wife and you're looking for a team to put her in, or if you simply wanna try some fun stuff, hopefully this video can help you guys out. Also, I am using S0 Iuno, but she does have her signature weapon. However, every other character is S0 without any signatures. Also, here's my Iuno build, so feel free to compare and potentially remove or add few seconds to each clear, depending if your Iuno is weaker or stronger than mine. Also, all these rounds were done on a second floor of middle tower against sentry construct. This floor has 10% arrow havoc damage buff and also 10% glacial and spectral reds, so just bear that in mind when looking at the times as well. So now with all that out of the way, let's get into it. So before we move on to our actual teams, let's quickly talk about our healer options here. And starting with sub DPS Iuno teams, we have our usual suspects here being Shorekeeper, Verina and Baizhi. So to no one's surprise, Shorekeeper is indeed the best support character here, being faster by about 10 seconds, which does make sense considering her crit rate and crit damage buffs are really strong, and on top of that she does a little bit of damage herself through her super intro, which is definitely noticeable. But I really want to stress out just how nice this crit rate buff is, especially when I'm looking at these teams and when I'm looking at you, Augusta, specifically, because I don't know about you guys, but my Augusta is literally allergic to critting. I will pop my ult, I will do my big slashes and end up doing like 40k damage. It really hurts, man. But yeah, anyway, with Shorekeeper, well, it's still gonna happen, but hopefully less often, right? But yeah, basically Shorekeeper good, guys. Now that being said, a more interesting comparison will be between Verina and Baizhi, and actually, funnily enough, my Baizhi ended up doing better than Verina here. Which, well, this is the best example why you should take these times with a grain of salt. Like, I'm not gonna try and tell you guys to abandon your Verinas and to invest all stonks into Baizhi, but what I do want to point out is that these two characters are actually way more close in performance than people might believe. Both characters do provide 15% damage buff to whole team, with Verina adding 20% attack on top of that. But Baizhi can also give you 15% attack if you manage to pick up her feather, so it's actually not that different. However, there is a problem with Baizhi, and that is this feather. With the amount of mobility characters have nowadays, trying to find this feather and then pick it up can be, let's just say, tricky to say the least. Like you can see me here, I'm swapping to Augusta with her dashes just throwing me around the whole map. I'm barely missing this feather, so now I have to run back to get it, and I still end up missing it, and yeah, I just basically gave up here. Just hit that reset button, it is what it is. But yeah, sometimes trying to get it can actually be a DPS loss, so just be mindful of that when playing this character. And of course, you can choose to completely ignore the feathers. Then Baizhi teams will end up being about 5 seconds slower on average than Verina, which is still pretty decent all things considered. So long story short, don't sleep on Baizhi, guys. Very underrated character, and just because it's not Shorekeeper doesn't mean it's bad. Now, if we're gonna look at main DPS Iuno teams, it's basically same story, and you can actually see that again. Once again, Baizhi ended up being somehow faster than Verina here. And I did multiple runs with these teams, and Baizhi clear times were way more all over the place. Sometimes she was faster than Verina, sometimes she was slower. But again, all I'm trying to say here is that these two characters are pretty much interchangeable. So don't be blinded by tier lists, guys. If you need another support, this free 4-star character is right here. And you don't need her sequences at all, she is perfectly viable at S0. But enough of me spreading Baizhi propaganda, because in main DPS Iuno teams we actually have another fourth option, which is Aero Rover. That's right guys, while Aero Rover themselves does not provide any substantial buffs, their signature sword actually provides 26% global arrow damage buff. And since it's global, that means we can also swap characters without worrying about losing said buff. So if you like doing quick swaps, this might be an option for you. And as you can see, the clear time is actually on par with Verina and Baizhi here, but sorry to say, it's not all sunshine and rainbow here guys, because while the potential is definitely there, so is the clunk, and it's a lot of clunk to deal with when playing. For me, the biggest problem when playing Aero Rover is simply that their hitbox for mid-air attacks is so tiny that sometimes I will just hop into the air and hit absolutely nothing for 2 seconds straight, therefore building no forte at all and therefore making my rotations way longer. And that is not even mentioning other things like bosses just simply running away from you or knocking you out of your mid-air state. It is really annoying, trust me guys. But if you are interested in playing this team, what I recommend is just slot your rover in, even without any echoes, simply try it out, see if this playstyle is something to your liking. Then you can decide if you wanna build it or not. Me personally, I don't really recommend it, I don't find it too fun, it's just too annoying to play. I wish it didn't, because I actually quite like Aero Rover's animations and the concept in general, but with this amount of clunk, I'm good. It is what it is, I guess. Oh yeah, and also if you are running Rover, just make sure you are using Rejuvenating Glow Echo set instead of DPS set, it is way better in my opinion. Okay, so now let's move on to actual team comparisons, and we will be starting with sub DPS teams. And as you can see, there is quite a lot of options here to choose from, some more interesting than others for sure. But let's start with the good old El Clasico, which is Augusta. So we don't need to yap too much about this team, because when I say Iuno, basically the first character that comes to mind, well aside from Iuno herself, is Augusta. This is definitely the strongest Iuno team. You can see that even with my extremely mid build, I still managed to clear 30 seconds over the required time. And this is on non-electro weak floor as well, so it has potential to go even higher in the future. Also extremely easy to play. Augusta kinda restricts you from swapping characters because of her outro, so you're just gonna end up playing the classic 1-2-3 rotation, going through every character one by one. That being said, there is one optimization that I can recommend, and it is doing double Augusta intro and skipping Iuno's intro. So if you played Augusta, you probably noticed that if you burn through all of your abilities, you're actually missing a little bit of Sun Forte. So you need to do one more heavy attack to enable Griffin attacks. But if you manage to throw an additional intro skill, it will fill your purple forte and you'll be able to hit that missing glowing heavy attack really easily. And for Iuno, her intro does give 5 stacks of damage buff and additional forte, but frankly we don't really need either of those. We can actually execute her rotation with forte generated only by her skill and ult. And we can stack her damage buff by doing weaker attacks beforehand. I also have a guide on how to play this team with full rotation breakdown, so if you want to know all the details, feel free to check it out. Okay, next up is another classic, that being Jiyan. Now you have to forgive me here guys, because I don't actually have Jiyan, so I'll be basing my opinions on what I've seen online. But yeah, this is clearly the second strongest sub DPS Iuno team right after Augusta, and it does make sense when you think about it, because Iuno is giving here a whopping 50% heavy attack bonus to the character that is basically all about that heavy attack damage. However, bear in mind that this clear was done on an Aero weak floor, that's why it ended up being better than Augusta, but still, it is really impressive to have a 1.0 character doing this well. It's definitely an upgrade over Mortefi even at S0 R0 because not only we are getting more damage buffs, but also Iuno is actually doing a ton of damage herself. And on top of that, her rotation is way faster and more comfortable to play than being stuck on Mortefi and spamming basic attacks just to fill up that concerto. Alright, now we're getting onto some more fun teams and we're gonna start off with Phoebe, and as a DPS Phoebe enjoyer myself, I was very excited to try this one out. But unfortunately, my hopes and dreams ended up being shattered just like in real life, guys, because this team really was struggling with damage. And granted, this floor has a 10% spectral resistance, so we are getting a little bit cooked here, but I don't know. Maybe in the future on a spectral weak floor we will be able to squeeze out a 3-star clear? Only time will tell. Unfortunately, this team has a few problems. First of all, because of Phoebe's reliance on Spectral Frazzle, we are forced to use Spectral Rover, and that means no Shorekeeper or Verinas to help us out here. So we are even more reliant on Iuno's buffing, but here's another problem, guys. Phoebe's rotation in general is quite long because she has to charge and do 4 heavy attacks, and if you get stalled even by just a little bit, Iuno's heavy attack buff will run out before we finish doing damage, ending up of course in a damage loss. So yeah, it's not the best. And again, this floor is definitely not the most optimal place for testing, so just keep that in mind. Also, my Phoebe is not using her signature, so maybe if you have her sig, you can try this playstyle out, but I'll probably stick to other teams. When it comes to playing this team, it is a little bit tricky to set up because you need both characters to intro to Phoebe, first Rover to pass on Moonlit Echo set buffs, and then Iuno to pass the heavy attack buff. So looking at this example here, we will be starting with Spectral Rover by building their Forte and using Forte skill. We're gonna need 2 Forte skills in total, by the way, guys, to build up Concerto, so when waiting for its cooldown to come off, we will be swapping to Iuno here and do her rotation instead. We do the usual stuff, we enter the flying form, pop skill, then also build more Forte and start eating this Forte. But before building full Concerto here, we do need to swap off and go back to Rover. Remember guys that once we outro from Iuno, the heavy attack buff is up and we cannot swap off anymore. So I'm back on Rover and I will start popping everything I have just to build Concerto as fast as possible and apply Spectral Frazzle. Then we simply intro to Phoebe, give her the Echo set buff, and we go back to Iuno and finish that rotation as well by doing skill and glowing heavy. And once again, we intro to Phoebe and we can finally start doing damage. So yeah, that's pretty much it guys. Bit unfortunate to see this performance, but if you manage to get a better run than me here, do let me know, and if not, I mean, well, there's still side the towers, I guess. Okay, since we are on a topic of spectral teams, let's move quickly on to Zani, and to no one's surprise, this team did end up being way better than DPS Phoebe. Mind you, I am using Zani's signature here. Sorry guys, I don't really have any other gauntlets to use. But still, we do have over 15 seconds to spare here, and once again, this is on a spectral res floor, so this team can definitely pop off in a content made for it. The playstyle is pretty much the same as in Phoebe DPS team. We need to double intro to Zani to pass both Phoebe's Echo set buffs and Iuno's heavy attack buff, so we will be mixing Phoebe's and Iuno's rotations just like we did with Iuno and Spectral Rover before. Simply do one heavy attack on Phoebe, then swap onto Iuno and do her full rotation without one of her skills at the end. Then go back to Phoebe, finish her rotation, intro to Zani, then swap back to Iuno and finish Iuno's rotation, and once again intro back to Zani, and after that you can start popping off. You can also probably replace Phoebe with Spectral Rover, but to keep it real with you guys, I am absolutely terrible at playing Zani Rover team, so I feel like I would be doing a huge disservice to this playstyle. However, if you are a Phoebe-less Zani expert, please do let me know if a team of Zani Iuno Rover is even feasible. Alright y'all, so if you thought we were coping with Phoebe or Zani, you better get ready because it's time for a real cook here, that being Danjin. Danjin mains rejoice because right after Frolova we are getting yet another heavy attack buffer here, and as you can see, surprisingly it's not even that bad. Okay, to be fair, and let's be real here for a moment, Iuno is doing like 80% of a team damage here, but hey, we are playing a 1.0 4-star DPS here after all, so we take what we can get, right? Also, my Danjin's build is pretty mid. I think you guys have like stat breakpoints to solo holograms and whatnot, and I definitely don't reach those, so you might expect even better performance on your end. Aside from Danjin's HP consumption and, well, fear of getting one-shot, this team is actually fairly simple to play. I decided to mix Shorekeepers and Iuno's rotation a little bit to save some time. Basically swap off when doing Forte heavy attack on Shorekeeper and swap off when jumping between forms on Iuno, but this is optional. However, another thing of note here is that I am actually doing a full DPS Iuno rotation here, and I keep going even when my Concerto is full, and that is because of, as I mentioned, Iuno's damage is simply way higher than Danjin, so we just want to help out a little by throwing in some more Iuno attacks. You know how it is, guys. So Kuro Games just revealed full Galbrena's kit, and it seems like her attacks will be considered heavy attack damage, guys, meaning that Iuno should definitely be a potent teammate option here. Of course, we can't really tell how well this team will end up performing in reality, especially since apparently some of her skills are considered as echo skill damage instead of heavy attack, so we will have to wait for her release to see the actual numbers. That being said, we don't have any echo skill damage buffers yet, so going with characters like Iuno, Mortefi, etc. seems to be the way. Also, she is a flavor of the month character, so I would assume that this combo of Galbrena and Iuno will end up destroying every content. So if you guys are planning on pulling Galbrena and were considering her team options, well, here's an idea. Okay, so now let's move on to main DPS Iuno teams, and as you can see, similarly to sub DPS teams, we do have quite a lot of options to choose from here, which is really nice to see considering this is not really the recommended playstyle. And again, these were cleared with S0R1 Iuno, and I do recommend getting her signature weapon if you are interested in playing DPS Iuno. She will be about 20 seconds slower on average if we use a 5-star standard gauntlet, so be mindful of that, guys. We will be starting off with Jianxin, and this will basically be our default option for main DPS Iuno teams. Jianxin does give 38% liberation buff, which is actually the biggest liberation buff we currently can get, and since it's a standard character, there is a high chance you guys might already have her in your roster. Another great thing is that you really don't need to min-max her at all. Jianxin does barely anything here aside from passing outro buff, so if you don't have a lot of resources to spare, this can be an attractive option for you. However, the biggest downside to this character is her atrocious, and I really mean atrocious, Concerto build-up. Definitely need Marcado weapon here to speed up this build-up, and even then, I still ended up having to do double intro to Jianxin and using 2 skills just to barely fill the gauge. So yeah, it can be a little annoying to play, but the big liberation buff is definitely making up for it. If you like seeing big numbers on your Iuno, this team will provide for sure. Just make sure your Jianxin is running Moonlit set instead of Sierra Gale, since her damage is basically non-existent. We do want to maximize her buffing capabilities. I also have a full detailed guide on how to play this team where I do explain every single step in the rotation, so give it a watch, guys, if you're struggling to play it. Next up is Ciaccona, and once again I do have to apologize to you guys because I don't have this character, so I will be basing my opinions on what I've seen from other people playing this team. But she is definitely the best Iuno teammate when it comes to main DPS playstyle. She really is just better Jianxin, guys. While her buffing capabilities are a bit lower due to her giving 24% arrow damage buff versus Jianxin's 38% liberation buff, unlike Jianxin, her rotations are way quicker and more smooth to play, so no clunk included here, guys. You basically can just end up playing the most default 1-2-3 rotation without any double intros, any quick swap whatsoever, and this team will still perform. And on top of that comfort, Ciaccona also does respectable damage herself, even at R0, so that should definitely offset the buffing difference between the two. So if you manage to get yourself Ciaccona, you should definitely try this team comp. Okay, and now we have another Aero character, that being Aalto. And I want to give a shout out to Kaloku here, because I honestly did not expect I will be able to find anyone actually playing this team. But yeah, I will be pretty much echoing his sentiments here, and feel free to watch his video if you want to know more details on how to actually play this team. You can find the link in the description below. Basically, you can think of Aalto as a worse version of Ciaccona. He gives 23% arrow damage buff, which is almost the same as Ciaccona's. He also has a reasonably quick rotations and does a little bit of damage on top. It is definitely more damage than Jianxin, guys. And although welcome, you don't really need his sequences, as they only increase his own damage, which is not the most important thing in the world really, but his buffing capabilities are fully complete at S0. And if you are running Static Mist, which is a 5-star standard pistol, you can give additional 10% attack buff to Iuno here, which is also very welcome. However, to keep it real, guys, I'm not really sure how many people would be interested in playing this team. I don't think most people have this character up and ready to go, and if you are going to build someone, you might as well build Jianxin instead. But hey, maybe you don't like Jianxin, or I don't know, maybe you wanna repay Aalto for ruining his beloved bow. If that is the case, know that this team is definitely up there with other competitive options for Iuno. Okay, next we have Yinlin, and this is hands down my favorite Iuno team to play. This is what I personally run when playing Iuno, and it can be surprising since Yinlin has been constantly doom posted into oblivion, but I don't know, man, it just feels good to me. We get 25% liberation damage buff here, which is a bit lower than Jianxin's, but definitely nothing to scoff at. But on top of that, similar to Ciaccona, Yinlin also provides respectable damage herself. And on top of that, her rotations are extremely fast. Just like I'm doing here, guys. Once you intro to Yinlin, all you need to do is pop her skill, then do a spin with her heavy attack and finish that off with another skill. After that, simply use up your remaining abilities like Ult and Forte heavy attack, and yeah, you're good to go. So yeah, very easy to play. You can also split this rotation if you want, like I did here in this run, but you can also run the basic 1-2-3 rotation and it performs almost the same. And mind you, this Yinlin is running a battle pass weapon, so if you have her signature, which is considered one of the best weapons in the game by the way, you'll definitely be able to pop off with this team. Anyway, apologies for glazing so much, but I don't know, man. Me personally, I'm just really happy about the fact that Yinlin finally gets a team where she is actually good and not just some cope option. But keep in mind that this team can be more awkward in a content with multiple waves like Whimpering Waves, since, you know, she can't quickly reapply her coordinate attack marks on new enemies when they appear. So just be mindful of that when playing. Alright, now it's time for a few, let's just say more unorthodox teams. Starting off with Changli. And I know what you guys are thinking, who in the right mind would play Iuno with Changli? But hear me out here, guys. Changli is the go-to character when we wanna do some random team building shenanigans, as she's basically the quick swap queen. But in this case, she can also provide us a 25% liberation buff, which is definitely noticeable. And she simply does very good damage herself on top. That being said, this team is definitely harder to play than your usual teams with Ciaccona, Yinlin, etc, etc. First of all, Changli's own rotation is quite long since we need to build 4 stacks of her forte, which obviously takes time. But the other tricky part is her outro, because her outro buff actually lasts only 10 seconds instead of usual 14 seconds with other characters. And it is actually a big deal because we simply cannot fit entire Iuno rotation in this 10-second window. But that's okay, guys, there is actually a way to play around this, so here's what we wanna do. So we won't be really sitting and spamming basics on Changli here, we will just hop in when there's a way to get a forte stack. So I'm starting off with Changli's skill and I do a follow-up basic attack to get my first stack. Then I simply move to Shorekeeper and start doing hair rotation instead. Then once I fill my forte bar and do heavy attack, since this animation is quite long, I can freely swap back to Changli, use another one of my skills here to build another stack, so that's already 2 out of 4. Then I simply return to Shorekeeper and finish up her rotation by building Concerto and popping anything I got basically. After that, I can intro to Changli, which is another forte stack for me, and since one of my skills cooldown already ended, I can pop another skill, so that's 4 out of 4 forte. Now here's the important thing, guys, since as I said, Changli's outro skill is very short, I actually swapped to Iuno without intro and enter her flying form beforehand. We're not gonna do any more attacks here, okay guys, because we don't have Changli's buff yet. So now that I'm in flying form, I can return to Changli and just finish off my rotation with detonating forte, popping my ult and detonating that forte again. And now we can go and deal damage with Iuno. So we intro to Iuno, and as you can see, because we don't need to waste time on switching forms, we are actually able to do all our attacks while under Changli's buff. So yeah, a bit more complex to play, but I ended up having quite a lot of fun when playing, and the clear times were pretty decent too, so if you're looking for some interesting alternatives for Iuno, definitely give this one a try. Alright, and with that, let's move on to our last team. If y'all were thinking we were cooking with Changli or Aalto, I'll do you one better, guys. So this team is actually not as stupid as you might think. I mean, okay, it is pretty goofy, but Cartethyia here performs similar role to Changli, where she contributes a lot of damage herself, but also provides global 17.5% arrow damage bonus when attacking enemies with negative effects, so in this case that's gonna be arrow erosion. And since this buff doesn't go away when swapping characters, we can freely swap in and out and optimize Iuno's and our sustains rotations too. And speaking of sustains, of course we wanna run Aero Rover here, which is not that bad actually, because with their signature sword, they will buff both Cartwheel and Iuno's arrow damage. And I'm pretty sure you can choose to run Shorekeeper too if you want, but if I'm being honest, I'm not really sure if that would end up being any better. Now, before looking at clear times, please bear in mind, these are heavily inflated in case of this team, due to arrow erosion shield buffs on this floor. So in normal circumstances, we should probably drop like 30 seconds off the timer. But this is S0 R0 Cartethyia, and if you have her signature weapon, I think this team should be able to keep clearing content fairly easily. I personally find Cartethyia without her weapon or without Ciaccona very underwhelming in general, so low-key, I'd say Iuno is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this team. But again, with better investment on your end, this could end up being a nice dual DPS team. Of course, bear in mind, the Aero Rover clunk still applies here. It's still annoying to play, but it is what it is at this point, I suppose. Also, in multi-wave content, this team can be kinda weird, similar to Yinlin, because of lack of arrow erosion application for Cartethyia. But if you are Ciaccona-less, just like me, you're probably used to it at this point. So this team is actually pretty simple to play. We will be running almost the most basic 1-2-3 rotation of Cartethyia into Iuno, Iuno into Rover, Rover into Cart, and so on. But there are some tweaks to be applied here. So since Cartethia's arrow damage bonus from outro requires targets to have arrow erosion stacks, after doing our big ult here, we actually want to stay on this character a little bit longer and do our skill to apply said arrow erosion. Remember guys that Cartethia's ult eats all the stacks on the enemy, so that's how we combat that if we want our Iuno to actually deal solid damage. So once we did apply that stack of arrow erosion, now we can simply move to Iuno and do her usual DPS rotation like I'm doing it here. And after being done with Iuno, here's another tweak, and you will probably be familiar with this if you don't have Ciaccona, but we actually wanna intro to Cartethyia here and do one full basic attack string to apply some more arrow erosion stacks. Since Aero Rover cannot apply any stacks themselves, we are hopping into Cartwheel whenever possible so we can actually load all 6 stacks before her actual rotation begins. But yeah, now we can return to Aero Rover and now we can do the usual rotation, ended up with Forte skill to apply the signature weapon buffs, and now we can pop off with both Cartethyia and Iuno after that. And yeah, next time if you see an arrow stage in Tower of Adversity and are thinking to yourself, who should I bench, Iuno or Cartethyia? Well, maybe you should actually play both. Okay, and with that we are finally done. Hopefully this video helped you guys get some ideas for how to utilize Iuno on your own accounts. Honestly, I am really happy to see just how versatile this character really is, since this used to be a little bit of a problem in the past with characters like Zani, but I do sincerely hope that Kuro will keep leaning into this type of flexible designs so everyone can basically cook something for themselves. And if you are still here watching, I do want to thank you guys as well for sticking around. I am trying something a little bit different here, since I really don't think anyone could take almost 30 minutes of just pure text. We are getting enough of reading in game itself, so yeah. But anyway, here's one more look at all the clear times. Feel free to pause and analyze those for yourself if you wish so. And that will be all from me. So as always, take it easy guys and have fun.